Welcome to the first episode of the Powerbuilding Academy, where we are going to be discussing everything from powerlifting to bodybuilding and the benefits of incorporating both styles of training. Joining me today, we have powerlifting coach Houston Woods, bodybuilding coach Cody Taylor, and bodybuilding coach Vaughn Atkins. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing
well. How are you?
How about the rest of you guys?
Doing well. I'm excited for this first one.
I'm kind of nervous.
You are? Why are you nervous? You talk about this all day, every day.
Yeah, but
I guess
there's no people that listen. That.
What did you say, Vaughn? I missed it.
I said normally it's not recorded, so I guess it's a little different.
Yeah, that's true.
Same information.
Same information, right? But now it's documented so people can fact check. So obviously, like there's like the world of powerlifting and the world of bodybuilding have become very, very popular amongst not just athletes, but in the general fitness world. And a lot of personal trainers, a lot of coaches are incorporating both of those styles of training into their clients' routine. And what we wanted to really talk about is like provide the education on how to effectively use both styles of training and then seamlessly blend them together. So like with Houston and I, we work more specifically with powerlifting side, and then Cody and Vaughn, you guys work more with the bodybuilding side, but there are a lot of times where those two things are going to blend into what's called power building. And so we want to make sure that people have good quality information and all of the tools at their disposal in order to either create on their own a program that's going to work best for them, or just really give them the best education possible on how to achieve their goals within either one of their respective sports or blending them together. So do you guys find that like a lot of your clients like they want to be super strong, but they also really want to look good?
100%.
So
very rarely do you find in the general population a clientele that is really focused in on one aspect or the other. Most people just are looking to be healthy, when that can mean a lot of different things. So a lot of people always want to aspire towards that strength. And then of course, if you're going to work out, you might as well look good too. So
that's exactly what I say. Like, if you're going to be strong, you might as well look good doing it.
That's right.
And I think on the powerlifting side, and Houston, you can probably speak to this a lot too. Like the old school way of thinking is eat big to lift big, right? Like health was not, and even to some degree now, but I think it's gotten a little bit better, but health was not a major component in the sport of powerlifting.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of the older powerlifters, specifically like, Louis Simmons, West Side, even people like C.T. Fletcher, a lot of people like that, they would go to McDonald's, they would eat a lot of fast food. They're really just focusing on getting as much food as possible. And like now, a lot of people are really realizing it with proper mechanics and learning how to actually train the body correctly and using your accessories for bodybuilding. You can move the same load someone is moving 2 to 3 classes above you. That's why you're seeing people in like the 220s and 198s and even 181s deadlifting and squatting massive weight. That people, in the 80s and 90s, you got people who are known as the best of the best moving weight like that, but they're moving at like a 242 and 275. So it's really funny and interesting to see how the trends for powerlifting has changed, and how with the incorporation of bodybuilding, you can kind of make up for that, and that having that less sheer mass and having more functional muscle on the body.
Absolutely. And, in the sport of powerlifting, in the sport of bodybuilding, I think over the years, there's been this huge transition into, like, I don't know how I really want to word this, but, when bodybuilders are at their peak, to people who are not educated in the sport of bodybuilding or what it actually takes to get there, they look at that as, oh, this is the epitome of healthy, right? When that's probably the least unhealthy you will ever be.
Right.
So either Vaughn or Cody, you want to touch on that?
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting, Houston's comparison with Louis, just kind of the evolution that powerlifting has had. You can look at the greatest bodybuilder of all time and Ronnie Coleman, and you look at the way that his perception on bodybuilding is completely different than 95% of the competitors nowadays. He's 8 back injury or back surgeries and
the guy can barely walk, but it's still just kind of a testament to show how both have kind of progressed in their own, but very, very different ways, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Bodybuilding has definitely gone slightly more on the unhealthy side. And then powerlifting has come from the unhealthy side to the slightly more healthy side. Not to say that both sports aren't extremely taxing on the body, because of course they are. But I think one has become more health conscious overall and not sacrificing the body from the nutrition side of things in order to gain strength. Whereas on the bodybuilding side, it's transitioned more into, I am going to sacrifice my health for my sport. But and obviously it's very different, like talking about people who are competitive within their respective sports and then the general population, right? So the general population is not going to go to the extremes that people who compete in these sports do. But I think it is really important to know that people who aren't competing in bodybuilding, looking like that is not really attainable if you're not actually within the sport either.
Sure.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Wait, I do agree with that, but I will say I do think that there has been a big push, and maybe this just even over the past 5 years, but I will say just kind of mainstream bodybuilding, the push for health does seem to be there. You see a lot more promotion on blood work, and especially with Revive, their big business that they do. There's not a single organ supplementation that's not out there available. And still, like, to your point, maybe in the grand scheme of things, the general population, that's not their focus. Maybe a little bit more on the higher end of the spectrum. But yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, for me personally, like, to interject, I feel like I don't know, I kind of feel like a little bit of the opposite when it comes to bodybuilding and health wise. I just kind of feel like health is kind of like at the back burner, if you ask me. Just like, I feel like a lot of guys are like pushing a huge amount of gear, and they're thinking that, their favorite bodybuilders, Phil Heath and Ronnie Coleman, were running these huge cycles where those guys are so genetic freaks that they didn't have to take as much as a lot of these guys think. So I feel like you have a lot of these guys, Dallas MacArthur and all these, Sean Roden and RP, all these guys that are pushing these huge cycles, diuretics, and all these different things to get, competition lean and get that dryness and that fullness and that big combination. And that results in you pushing a lot more gear than they were pushing back in the day. Back in the day, you even can see, like, Golden Air bodybuilding, they'll talk about how they were using straight water and over-the-counter diuretics back then. And now it's like we've upped it to the point where you have site enhancement and all these different things that have these long-term effects on these guys. So I just feel like I feel like bodybuilding it's in a weird place where people, they look better, if you ask me. Like, at the end of the day, we talk about Golden Air and they say it's the best conditioning and all these different things. But I mean, these guys now, man, they're coming in crazy condition. Yeah, you might not see the Christmas tree as much as you want, but these guys are 4% body fat on stage, if you ask me. But
Vaughn, something to kind of just touch on that. Sorry to cut you off, but these guys, they are also, 30, 40 pounds heavier on stage than they were, 20, 30 years ago. But one of the kind of the problems, I think what's going on right now is, I do think that in the early 2000s, in the Ronnie, the Jay, those types of eras, where people weren't as transparent about their protocols and stuff like that, I think the misconception was, or the reality was, you did run, a gram and a half of gear per week and that kind of stuff. And one thing I've noticed nowadays is that a lot of the top level pros, they are very transparent about their cycle usage, but we've kind of at a point where people don't buy into that, right? They think that it's some sort of secret, or you're not being truthful when you say, you're only running 500 cc's of tests per week. They're like, no way is that happening, So it's like, we're in this kind of, like you said, this kind of limbo space where the people at the top are trying to make it, a little bit more on that health side, but there's so much resistance because of what is so heavily involved in this sport. It's kind of a catch-22, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would agree.
And nowadays you see a lot of people transitioning from powerlifting into bodybuilding, right? And you don't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, I just can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but you don't necessarily see it go the other way as often. Typically it's powerlifting into bodybuilding. And I think a lot of that has to do with, on the powerlifting side, the transition in, you know, the way of training. Like West Side was pretty much like in past days was the only way that you would train, right? Conjugate method or no method. And now that there's so many different types of training methods that incorporate a lot of hypertrophy, which is we're going to talk about in a little bit, that incorporate a lot of hypertrophy, like the physiques of powerlifters are changing quite a bit, especially on the female side, I would say. And a lot of these powerlifters are easily transitioning into the world of bodybuilding and, you know, doing 1 or 2 shows and getting their pro card very quickly. Right. And again, a lot of that has to do with the transition and the style of training.
I think the perfect, sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good. Go ahead.
I think like the perfect person, if we're talking about power building, going from a powerlifting background to a bodybuilding background, that's I wouldn't say has successfully transitioned. Well, I mean, I think at this point I would say successfully has transitioned is somebody like a Andrew Jack, that maybe, I'm not saying he was necessarily in the powerlifting community in the sense of competing, you know, countless times a year, different things like that, but lifting those heavy weights with Larry Wills all the time, just doing those heavy compound movements. And he's coming in with one of the most aesthetic physiques that we've seen in open bodybuilding. And people are, you know, ranting and raving about his potential of being the next Mr. Olympia for how many years, you know what I mean? So I think like he's a perfect example of somebody that was lifting heavy. You know, you have all these different myths of having big weights and different things like that when you're doing these heavy compound lifts and X, Y, and Z. And Andrew Jack just came and literally like he debunked all of those myths like at once. Like he showed you can be strong, you can be aesthetic, you can have a small waist, you can be tall. Like you, everything that they say a bodybuilder like shouldn't be, it's like kind of like he fit that mold. And yeah, so I think that's like a really good example.
Absolutely. And you know, that again, going back to the type of training that each one requires, the hypertrophy versus the strength training. I mean, Houston, you want to chime in just kind of about like just high level what a powerlifting like training structure would look like?
Well,
I know it's going to be different for everyone, but just kind of high level.
Well, I'm going to kind of have to break this down so people have context. So beginner lifters, a lot of time it's not just about getting stronger, it's about mastery of the movement itself. So that right there will kind of bleed into bodybuilding where you're doing, you know, higher repetition training sets. So like, you know, 3 to 8, 4 by 8, you'll see some people do a 2 by 10 and stuff like that. For intermediate, you know, you're kind of moving from that movement, from that kind of movement mastery and just ingraining that movement pattern to teaching the lifter, you know, positioning, stacking, doing more like, you know, like the conjugate method where you're doing like dynamic effort and training like a lot of hard stuff like, you know, good morning, stuff like that. Because typically you're not going to see a beginner lifter doing, you know, banded work. You're not going to see a typical newer lifter doing.
Well, you shouldn't.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't. You shouldn't. But we all know. But like, you know what I mean? So like, you know what I mean? So like, you know, the beginning, you know, you'll get these, you know, that's kind of, you know, tying back to the bodybuilding and hypertrophy where they blend, where like early on it's higher, you know, you're doing, the new lifters are doing high rep stuff and they're doing high rep accessories. Then we get into the intermediate advanced. When you get to a certain point, let's put it this way, like 80% for someone that deadlifts 800 pounds is like 700, 675 to 700. And that's not maintainable over a long period of time for high reps. So that's when you kind of pull back and you're doing more like less work, like less training volume, a little bit higher intensity where you start doing a dynamic effort and stuff like that. But then like I give you a great example. So like a lot of my training itself is, I give you a great example. My deadlift day on this past Friday, 3 by 4, 4 by 4. That's it. But the actual volume that I'm moving per set is still very high. The intensity is high, but I'm not doing sets of 12. But I put more into my accessories for my to focus on my weak points. And specifically, you'll see a lot of other lifters, you know, depending on their training style, you know, some people do SBDs, some people do like fifth set and stuff like that. But typically, you'll see a lot of people, they kind of start eventually backing off of those higher rep volume, all those higher rep sets, to where you're really just practicing. You're practicing to maintain your strength, to be completely honest with you, and just packing on as much muscle as possible. So even in power building itself, there's an aspect where you'll have people doing higher rep volume in their training for your barbell work, and higher rep training for your accessories. Then you get on the other spectrum, you'll see guys just doing 2x3, 3x4, 3x5, but then they're putting a lot of effort into their accessories, or where you get with conjugate and other types of training where you're doing like dynamic days, you're doing 9 sets of doubles, 9 sets of triples and stuff like that, training a different modality of training. That's a whole other, concept. I don't want to kind of go too far into that. But like Cody was saying, with Ronnie, I like Ronnie. I love Ronnie, but I love Dorian more, to be honest with you. Dorian, for me, was really what I looked at when it came to a lifter or a bodybuilder. So Dorian Yates and Dan Green. Dan Green, massive lifter. His capacity for, he's one of those people that, like we were talking about before, where you'll hear people saying, where people try to be more transparent, you'll have people say, well, I'm only taking 500 milligrams of testosterone a week, blah, blah, blah. But then we don't talk about this in the concept of training when it comes to, and this is something that a lot of people don't really want to hear, genetics itself. Genetics isn't just you have the capacity to grow. It's like, what do you respond? How well do you respond to these compounds, so you can get as much as possible with as little as possible. And the same thing applies for bodybuilding. You have some guys like, I can't train higher rep work right now. But you get people like Dan Green, those freaks, he's probably running a shit ton, but still his capacity for volume and work is so high. But then you get people like Dorian, where they're doing, he's doing heavy deadlifts, heavy pin lay rows. So you already know, everybody knows that Dorian loved pin lay rows, which you see more powerlifters doing a lot of rowing and stuff to kind of train that position through here, working on that back. But there's a lot of things that I think that it's kind of untapped when it comes to training, specifically for powerlifting and bodybuilding. Because I see a lot of kids who bodybuild and they use that as an excuse to do zero barbell work. How are you going to get density? How are you going to get that density that barbell work gives you? But a lot of hypertrophy movements where you're doing like isometrics and stuff like that, you're training the muscle. But we all know that if you want real density, you have to do some type of barbell training. I don't care who you are. You have to do some type of barbell training. And that's why it's so much easier for people to transition from powerlifting to bodybuilding, because with powerlifting, we're doing so many compound movements, we're doing so many accessories, and we're building our frames. Our frames are getting so massive. For 220ers, 240ers, we have 220s and 240s they look like monsters. And then when they transition from powerlifting to bodybuilding, all they have to do is just work on their weak points, because the work ethic's already there. All that's already there. They're really just fine tuning those weak points. Sorry for a long rant, guys. I was thinking about this.
No, I completely agree with you. And, going back to talking about weak points, even from the powerlifting side of things, there is this big misconception that you're going to get better at squatting by squatting more. You're going to get better at deadlifting by deadlifting more. And that's not the case, because if you don't take the time to correct whatever is wrong with your squat or whatever is holding you back from, adding weight onto your bar with whatever power lift you're trying to work on, when you continue to just do those movements, you're just compounding the issue, right? And you're only going to be as strong as that one limitation is going to let you be, and you won't be able to surpass that. So it is really important to pull back and really isolate what those weak points are and focus on accessory movements that are going to improve that. That way you can get better under the bar. But Cody and Vaughn, can you kind of chime in a little bit about your thoughts on barbell work and bodybuilding?
Go ahead, Vaughn.
I know there's a lot of mixed opinions within the world of bodybuilding about barbell work and
both of our perspectives on this will be good to hear. So
yeah, I mean,
they're a little different, but
yeah, me personally, during my all season, I'm real heavy into the power building. So I mean, I do a lot of deadlifts, I do a lot of barbell rows, I do a lot of bench press as well. But with that being said, I do love my dumbbells, so I do like dumbbell presses. I like heavy presses with the dumbbells and different things like that. However, I mean, I love barbells, man. RDLs with the barbell, you name it. I like barbells 9 times out of 10, a little bit more than the dumbbells, even though I do like them. So I'm always an advocate for it, especially during the off season. As you see me in prep, I might not do as much barbell work just because as you get leaner, risk of injury, different things like that, and do a little bit more machines just to be safe. But I mean, if you're looking to grow during your off season, like I'm just talking about density, talking about strength, talking about just, it's a certain aesthetics I just feel like you can't carve out if you don't have a barbell. You know what I mean? So I'm a huge advocate for barbell work and lifting heavy. Like me personally, I'm not saying that lifting heavy within reason, with a purpose, intentional reps, not just lifting heavy just to say I picked it up, but lifting heavy, mind muscle connection, time under tension, a good tempo. But yes, throwing some damn weight, like challenge yourself. Finish that
heavy,
set and feel like shit.
heavy is relative depending on who's picking it up, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's the biggest thing. And then, like talking about intensity, and you were talking about Dorian Yates, and I mean intensity is intensity. You can intensify somebody like Phil Heath that makes a 30-pound dumbbell feel like it weighs a ton, and then you have somebody like Ronnie Coleman that needs to throw on 800 pounds for it to feel like a ton. So intensity is going to vary between the person, but 100% to 100%, regardless of who you are. It may look different because you're more bigger, you're more athletic, or whatever that looks like. But if you're giving 100%, you're giving 100%. So it's just like keeping making sure like you're going hard 100% all the time during that off season, loading on that weight on that bar, proper form, engage those muscles, think about what you're trying to contract. If you're working on hamstrings, focus on the hamstrings. Am I feeling it in the right places? If you are, keep it going, keep digging. You know what I mean? So that's just my biggest thing. It's just form, time and attention, and heavy weights. I do like some heavy weights. It feels good. So.
Cody,
So kind of my thoughts on that. Yeah, like I definitely agree with everything that Vaughn said, because I do think that there's just a certain form of mentality and a sort of discipline that you just learn under a barbell that you don't get in anything else. A bar is heavy, it's uncomfortable, and there's a lot of times you're finding yourself where those last few sets, last few reps, whatever it is, it's just hell, right? But there's a lot to be gained from that, I feel like. But me personally, over the past year, one of my biggest focal points in my own personal journey has been mind muscle connection. I've been in the gym pretty intentionally for about 3 years, and this whole year was really spent on mastering my mechanics, figuring out my own personal body mechanics, how I can attack each rep the most efficiently. And so, I've done the barbell work. I've worked under some of your programming, Ashley, all that stuff. I know the form, the mechanics, but for a good couple years, I never knew, if I was squatting, how do I target my quads here? If I need a quad day, I need these quads to grow. So for me, really the past year and a half, 2 years, I've been really strictly onto machines. Now, whether that be hack squats, just like a plate loaded, I say machines and I generally mean something plate loaded, but that's on that guided plane. And I can go into that machine and I set up and I know exactly what muscle group is the intended target for that particular set. And so for me, it's just been a really good tool to be able to utilize that. I know exactly what I should be feeling, how I should be feeling it, where I'm feeling it at, and then so in translation to say all that, once I've mastered those body mechanics, now that I'm at the point where I can pick up a barbell, a bench press is nothing but a chest stretch and a chest contraction. It's not just mustering up as much weight as I can off my chest like it used to be. And like I feel like it is for a lot of people. And so I feel like we kind of have gotten stuck in this, like with anything in life these days, it's either one or the other, right? And it's, if you're a barbell person, machines are stupid, and the other way around. And I think both are pivotal tools into being able to accomplish your goals, whether you're a power lifter or a bodybuilder. Both should be incorporated to some facet of your training. But I do think that they go hand in hand and aren't as vastly different as a lot of people say. Now, to Houston's point, there's no density or anything, just muscle maturity that you can gain outside of a barbell. So that's kind of my viewpoints on it.
Yeah.
I think another thing too. Oh, sorry to cut you off. Ashley.
No, go ahead. Well, I mean, if you think about like every machine in the gym, right, it is some variation of a squat, a bench press, and a hinge, right? Every machine
Yeah.
is. And, you know, Cody, you were saying that, you know, when you were squatting with a barbell, it was really hard for you to connect with your quads. Well, I could see that. However, because you have so many other muscles that are working within that movement other than just your quads, right? But if you go on something like, you know, a hack squat, it's very isolated, right? Or a pendulum squat, it's very isolated. Leg extension, it's very isolated. Like you can focus on just that one particular group, right? Versus with a barbell, you're working your back, your core, your chest, your shoulders, your glutes, your hand, everything, right? And so it's a little bit harder for a lot of people to connect with one particular area of the body when everything else is working equally as hard, right? And a lot of that has to do with, you know, the position and the mechanics. And Houston and I were having a conversation earlier today about how one of his clients just had this very slight internal rotation on the knee, right? And it wasn't activating a part of the quad. And, you know, those are little tiny details that it's very hard for people to connect with when working with a barbell without doing that full self-evaluation every single lift and ingraining that. Right. So when we talk about muscle memory, it's like, yeah, we really have to incorporate a ton of mind muscle connection and muscle memory into those barbell lifts because there are so many different components that are involved with it that it's hard to mentally isolate one particular area.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think another thing to kind of note, like as you guys are talking, that came to my head is, in my opinion, too, barbell work is going to be more functional for the average person than machine work. I feel like someone deadlifting, squatting, overhead press, different things like that, bench, are all going to kind of be typical things you do throughout the day and movements that you're going to mimic. Versus like if you're doing some lateral raises on the machine, I mean, like when are you ever in a position doing lateral raises in real life? You're going to be doing an overhead press, putting the basket over the washing machine, or you might squat down, you know, to go pick up your child or whatever that looks like. So I do think that barbell work too for the average person is going to give you more of a foundation to utilize your, you know, regular day-to-day activities, even though it may sound a bit more dangerous. But I do think it's just going to get you a little bit more prepared for it. I mean, you're going to deadlift, picking up that laundry basket, picking up that box that the UPS guy just dropped off, or whatever that looks like. So just learning those cues on that form with the barbell, I just feel like we're mimicking in everyday life a lot more than the machines.
I almost think that learning how to do proper barbell movements is a safer way to move versus the machine, because a lot of times, and this is just kind of a general statement here, but like with machines, right, the machine is going to stabilize the weight for you. Like you don't have to stabilize that, right? Whereas with a barbell, you have to engage everything in order to stabilize, right? So I almost think that it's easier to forget all of the little details on a machine because the machine's doing a lot of the work for you.
Well, and you can brace up against a machine, right? Like a hack squat is not a straight path, right? Like your back can lean into it further. And so there's a little bit more leverage and stuff like that. That, like Vaughn was saying, you're picking up your kid and you lean back too far, you guys are both falling over, right? So
exactly. So Cody or Vaughn, one of the two, do you want to kind of go into specifically what hypertrophy training is and how it's utilized?
You go ahead, Cody.
I mean, so that's a pretty broad question.
I can
I
add in.
mean, definitionally, it would be hypertrophy is the act of building muscle, as opposed to building strength, right? So whenever you talk about hypertrophy, you're talking about a little bit more of the volume of the muscle, the density of the muscle, the way that the muscle looks. That's going to go into a little bit more isolation movements, like we were just kind of just speaking on, versus where a barbell is a very functional movement. Hypertrophy tends to be a little bit more isolated. You're going to be cut down into, you know, you might have a quad day, a hamstring day separated, you know, that kind of stuff. Typically going to find hypertrophy in a bodybuilding program. You know, that there are aspects of it in every fitness program, I would say, but it's usually a secondary proponent outside of the bodybuilding world, hypertrophy.
Another thing too that I would just kind of add to that, I agree with everything that Cody said. And in addition to just like a couple little cues to kind of just bring it down to a baseline level, if you are trying to train like a bodybuilder or, you know, hypertrophy training, however you want to phrase it, is going to be tempo, super, super, super important. When you're working out as a bodybuilder or however, like I said, however you want to phrase it, working out for aesthetics, whatever that looks like, you don't want to be, these aren't fast reps. It's intentional reps. You want to make sure that you're lifting that weight properly. Mind muscle connection are going to be huge cues that you're going to want to be really, really in sync with, making sure that you're feeling those reps in the right area, which is going back to that tempo, leaning into time under tension as well. So just making sure that you're having those long sets, those intense sets that are going at the right tempo, so you're feeling them in the right areas and you're building that mind muscle connection. So to me personally, like what got me to work out as a bodybuilder correctly, in my opinion, was when I started incorporating things like I would listen to R&B music. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I would listen to R&B music, or I would listen to gospel music or something a little bit slower to slow down my reps. I started to notice that I was just working out way, way, way too fast. So just certain things like that, you just want to take into account. So you got that tempo right, you got your speed right, your time under tension, you're feeling things in the right area. And you listen to the fast-paced music, it's a little hard to slow it down. So those are kind of little cues that I do to ensure that I'm working out how I need to progress.
It's kind of funny that you say about the tempo and stuff like that, and kind of tying back to intensity. When you learn how to fire everything the way you need to, you can build intensity with really lightweight, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people you'll see, like a big mistake is that they will mistake going fast for intensity. And that's a huge mistake that you'll see constantly. I mean, how many times have you seen lifters or kids, in the gym, they're throwing around 70s and weights that they really shouldn't even be using, throwing it around and just going fast for the sake of, instead of actually slowing down and contracting the muscle bellies correctly.
Sorry about that, my guy. One more time with the question.
I said that tying back to intensity and time under tension, how many times have you seen people or kids who are newer to bodybuilding and working out using weight that is way too heavy for them and just going fast instead of just using it? When I'm doing accessories, man, I'm going lighter, and I can build intensity just from learning how to contract properly. I can get the same out of 20s and 30s as if I would with 70s. If I'm doing like curls or something.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like the biggest thing is people want to, it's that ego lifting, social media too, just kind of wanting to post those really cool clips. And I mean, I've definitely been there before, trying to build my following, and you kind of feel that itch from the outside telling you to go heavier, pick up some heavier weight. It's going to make the video look cooler, different things like that. But you just have to kind of focus back on like, why are you here and what are you doing? What is the point of your movements? If the point of your movements is to build aesthetics and you're trying to go for a certain look, then you need to lift the weights a certain way to carve your body to fit that. So I feel like a lot of times too that we forget that that's what the weights are used for, the tools to chisel out those areas to make them look how you want them to look. You use the dumbbells to chisel your chest to look how you need it to look. You use that barbell row to chisel your back. You tuck those elbows in to hit your lats a little bit more, all those things to create this shape. So it's all about that intention. So when you're going in the gym, you're just doing hammer curls, balls to the walls, 100 pounds. It looks cool. The weight's kind of coming up, but you're getting no muscle contraction. You're getting zero mind muscle connection. You probably barely stimulated your biceps. You probably really threw out your whole shoulder. You probably got a little bit of lats in there. You're probably working out everything but biceps, essentially, to get that weight up. So definitely lighting that load, focusing on that squeeze, taking your time on those eccentric movements is just going to carve out that body to look like how you want to look. So yeah, I completely agree. I go in the gym all the time and people are just working out super, super, super fast, especially on RDLs. And then they say something like, I don't think RDLs work for me, or I don't feel them. I don't think they work in your hamstrings. No, RDLs have worked for a long time. Trust me, they work. You need to slow down. Like, they work.
And squats, man.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
You'll see a lot of guys, especially I hear this a lot, like, yeah, squats don't build my legs. Like, man, you're literally squatting down and using your legs for what they're made to do. How is that not going to build your legs? And a lot of times you'll see, like we are talking about before with barbell and movement mastery, you'll see a lot of people when they're squatting, they're not really even using their quads properly or even loading their quads in general. You see a lot of people are really folding. They don't have to hit their ankle mobility or the stability to actually do the movements correctly, which kind of ties back to like the machine work and the machine stabilizing for them. You see a lot of people use machines. They can't stabilize worth a damn for any of their movements to actually generate tension and maintain tension and losing
And I
muscle.
think too, as you were talking, it kind of just made me think too. Another thing that I feel like is super, super, super important that we need to understand is full range of motion definitely has its place most of the time. Like most of the time, you should be utilizing full range of motion. You should not break down the partials until you get to a certain point, either within your fitness career where you're at an advanced level where now you can incorporate partials to continue growing. You incorporate partials to like go past failure, or maybe it has its reason where you're trying to hit a certain peak on a bicep or whatever that looks like. But man, like so many times I see people they just think that partials are like, I don't know, it's just the secret to aesthetics or what that is. But it's just like, you got to go full range of motion. If you're going to do squats, you have to go all the way down, all the way back up, like lighten the load so you can go full range of motion, because you will get way more stimulus that way. Fully contract that muscle when you're doing the bicep curls. You don't need to just halfway curl and come right back up. Come all the way down and then curl all the way to the top. Big squeeze and then back down. You know what I mean? So a lot of people like breaking things down to partials. Even with bench press, you'll see people just very stingy presses. Like, come all the way up, man. You know,
one thing I want to add to that is not even like to the partial standpoint, but since we're kind of distinguishing between what is hypertrophy versus strength, you want to kind of dive into that a little deeper. As far as range of motion goes, Vaughn really focusing on the partials point, but I even have an argument to that to be said where range of motion is good sometimes when you're talking about time under tension. There's a certain point, if you are barbell squatting, when you can squat too low and there are zero tension in your legs and you're just sitting in a natural state. That is not a hypertrophic form of training, right? The hypertrophy form of that is a nice, slow, eccentric movement until the quads are no longer engaged, and then you come back up, right? So that's just another form of mastering each section of that movement, which doesn't necessarily mean for everybody and every kind of body mechanic ass to grass, right? That doesn't always mean that for everybody, because sometimes at a certain point in a lat stretch is one of the big things that I see. People come in on a lat pull down, that bar just yanks them back up and it's just shoulder girdle is coming out. You've now completely lost tension in that lat, which whenever we're talking about a hypertrophy standpoint, keeping that tension in that lat through the entire segment of that set is what hypertrophy is. So just to kind of reiterate, range of motion is obviously encouraged all the time, but not 100% of the time based on what you're trying to achieve and your goals at the time. I just wanted to point that out.
I think the big thing though, I think 95% of people realistically aren't ever going to be in a situation where they didn't squat low enough. I think most of the time, unless you're at like you're at a different level in your fitness journey, most people like 90% of the time are not going low enough. They're half repping. Like now, if you know about fitness, you've been working out for a little while, you've learned those cues and learned your form, I 100% agree. Like now you can start to assess, like maybe I'm going too long on my squat, different things like that. But I think like the average person, I've hardly ever seen someone say you're going too low.
They also need to know to just not free weight drop into a squat with zero eccentric control just because they need to go ass to grass.
That's all tempo. Yeah, 100%.
That's what I'm saying. And so like a full range of motion for somebody who's a beginner who doesn't have that eccentric control, but they see that I have to go full range of motion, they're just dropping that bar free weight and then it's just a joint thing. So that's what I'm saying is lighten up the weight. And it's not always about what you see these advanced lifters doing. A lot of times there's a lot more to be learned than dropping your butt down to your ankles in a squat or completely releasing on a lat pull down. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And from
Gotcha.
the coaching side, right? Like obviously we as coaches would evaluate where exactly that particular lifter is at and break that process down, right? Because if someone is brand new to squatting, like we're not going to throw a barbell on their back and expect them to do a perfect squat, right? Like after that assessment's done, if, you know, control on the way down is an issue, then we're going to teach the control maybe to a box first, right? And then once that piece of the puzzle is put into place, then we're going to take it to the next step, which, you know, for that particular person may be squatting to depth, right? But you have to break everything down into its smaller parts and learn it in stages prior to putting it all together. And Cody, to your point, people do see, you know, these advanced lifters or advanced athletes or people that have been doing this for a long time, you know, courtesy of social media, doing it, yes, the way that it should be done, but that isn't necessarily the end goal for a new person, right? It's all about breaking it down into stages and learning it piece by piece.
Or they don't like the capabilities to accomplish that the same way because their body's just is locked up into this tight little ball, right? And
right. So
so
there's probably going to be other issues that need to be addressed there, which is what I was
right,
saying. But
right. That was more my point. It's just, you know, it doesn't always have to look picture perfect, more so for the general population, just because that may not be as attainable as it is for all four of us sitting here, right?
yeah, I totally understand what you're saying.
Another thing that kind of ties back into what Cody and Vaughn was saying is with let me rephrase. Let me start over. So like what Cody was saying, like, you know, a lot of new people not knowing the difference between controlling the eccentric into the squat versus just dropping into it. With powerlifting, you're going to see a lot more, especially in intermediate and advanced training, or even newer, really, training like a specific portion of the lift that the lifter cannot maintain or generate tension in, especially like like pin press for bench, block pulls for deadlift, to train to lock out, deficit pulls for just maintaining overall tension and to kind of work on hip extension. And that's another big difference between powerlifting and bodybuilding, because I'm not really quite sure where you would see that in bodybuilding. You know what I mean? Instead of you like Vaughn, would you rather do pin press for a few sets or just blow up your triceps? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's another huge difference between powerlifting and bodybuilding is also there's movement selection when it comes to like main work and accessories and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And, you know, going back to training those weaknesses, there are so many different barbell variations for any given weakness, right? And like you said, taking the lift and breaking it down into its smaller parts, and you can just go forward and only train one portion of the lift. And once that gets better, then we go back to the full movement, right? Whether that's, you know, a 4-week block or 6-week block or whatever it may look like. And you don't necessarily see that type of training so much within the bodybuilding world. You don't necessarily see the movements getting broken down unless you're doing the partials, but that has a completely different purpose at the end of the day, right? Than doing a barbell variation to work through a particular sticking point.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to hear from Vaughn is like, how would you structure your off-season programming versus your in-season, like you're prepping for a competition? I think that's what a lot of people would want to know too.
For me personally, the way I'm going to program my off season is definitely going to be I'm going to be doing more compound lifts, more barbell work. I'm going to be lifting a bit heavier, probably have some more volume in there just because I'm going to be eating a lot more. So I'm going to be able to recover a bit better. In prep, I'm going to probably, we're going to isolate a lot more muscle groups. We're going to do a lot more cable work, a lot more machine work, a little less on the barbells, just because that nutrition is going to start to dip. Want to make sure that we're staying as safe as possible. So those are going to kind of like be the biggest differences. Intensity is always, like I said, like I'm big on intensity always being 100%. It's just that it's might be more reps in prep and a longer set versus all season. It might be a little bit of a shorter set, but heavier weight. So that would be probably like the biggest distinctions. But always keeping that intensity high throughout the whole way through, even on those low carb days, still trying to push the intensity as always. But really, it's just going to be the volume, and the weight that I'm going to be trying to move while I'm in the gym. But my movements, yeah, and then also too, like the off season is going to have heavier compound lifts. So I'm going to be doing a lot more heavier squats, a lot more RDLs, a lot more bench press, a lot of different things like that. I'm not big on overhead press, to be transparent with you guys. I hardly ever do any type of shoulder press exercises. Everything I kind of do is a lot more of those like lateral type movements on shoulders. But yeah, definitely a lot heavier compound movements on that all season.
What's your reasoning for not doing overhead work?
One, I guess growing up, you always hear that little myth of people talking about, their rotator cuff and their shoulders are always going to be one of the first things to go out. And I used to have a little bit of a funky little feeling in my left shoulder. And I used to press heavy all the time, 100-pound dumbbells, just pressing for reps and different things like that. So as I kind of just got a little bit more into correctional exercising and making sure that I'm activating the right muscle groups, and is it really necessary for me to lift this much weight for what I'm trying to do? It wasn't building my shoulders how I needed them to. You know what I mean? Like the aesthetics that I was looking for, I just felt like heavy shoulder presses weren't getting me there. Every now and again, you might see me throw in some type of press variation, maybe like on a machine or something like that. But most of the time, you're going to see me do a lot of I like to do partial lateral raises right here with the dumbbells. You'll see me do a lot of rear delt work and different things like that, but I just definitely won't focus on presses too much.
When you were doing the overhead presses with the 100s, was that in your younger years when you were just starting out?
Yeah.
So do you think a lot of that has to do with just ego lifting?
100%.
And like we were talking about with the bicep curls, like, the guys just doing it for the camera, right? Curling these bicep curls and are curling the 100s and not actually working the bicep. Do you think that's kind of the mindset that you were in at the time?
100%. I mean, like you can go, and that's why I'm like super transparent with all my stuff. You guys like check out my social. Like I don't delete things. Like my biggest thing is like once I decide to post it, it's there. Like keep it. I'm not deleting it. It's just me. It's part of my journey. Like it or not, it's just how all I learned what I learned. So you can go back to videos from me in like 2020, man. Like, like 2019 hammer curling 100-pound dumbbells for what? I don't know. You know what I mean? And doing shoulder presses with the 110s and different things like that. Even like I want to say my last all season back in 2021, I was just like, fuck it. We had threw on like 505 on the bar, and I was like, let me see how many reps I could get. And I think I hit it for like 12 or some shit. So, but yeah, I mean, man, like to be honest with you guys, I like lifting heavy though. So I'm a little bit of a like not true to all the traditions of bodybuilding, because I do love like lifting heavy. I do like that power building or powerlifting atmosphere. I do like that whole like let's go, like tap in, like let's pick this shit up. I do like that energy. But now knowing what I know now, I do try to chill out a lot on those heavier lifts just because I know it's not always the safest and they're not always optimal. A lot of times they're just to release dopamine for me because I like to do it. But I know it's not optimal, but I just like to do it for my well-being because mentally I like to work out because I like to work out before any of this ever started. That's why.
Which means that it is optimal then.
So
that's why
yeah,
we do this, right?
Optimal for my mental health. Yeah. Definitely. So yeah, you'll still see me like sometimes I'm like, hey, let me see if I can pick this shit up still. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Well, I think that's a great point that he just kind of touched on the mental health is, like we're kind of distinguishing what these two sports are and, what the big differences are in them in the two and everything. And it's just like, at the end of the day, people have achieved physiques. They've achieved strength goals through 100 different ways of going about doing it. You know what I mean? You look at, I can't speak too much on the powerlifting side of it, but I mean, you look at bodybuilding and you can point out 50 different bodybuilders and they all trained a different way. They all dieted a different way. They all did different forms of cardio. They had different coaches, and it's just, I think people get so cemented into one system, and it's just like, at the end of the day, we all started going in there because it was a release for us. It made us happy. We like picking up the heavy weight. We like looking good, whatever that may be, just do it. You know what I mean? And you want to see what that 1 or 2 or 3 rep deadlift maxes, do it, right? Because that we're all in here to just get better, and that doesn't always have to look the exact same each way.
Fitness looks different
100%.
on everybody, right, Cody?
Boo. But yes, I guess you're right.
That's a little inside joke between the two of us. Oh goodness, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, back to, like I said way earlier in this podcast, like West Side or nothing on the powerlifting side of things. And Houston, you could probably agree with me on this, but the conjugate method and the whole West Side barbell concept, yes, it does work. I'm not saying that it doesn't. And I think it's really good for a lot of people. But I don't necessarily think it's the best way to go about it for everybody. And I think that there's like bits and pieces that you can take and incorporate with other things. But just like on the bodybuilding side, there's so many different methods to accomplish the same goal. It is the same thing on the strength training side as well. So with that being said, like we defined hypertrophy, intensity for sure, and then just like increasing the size of the muscle. What a lot of people have a really hard time understanding is, well, if the muscle is getting bigger, aren't you by default getting stronger? And a lot of people cannot make the distinction between the two. Houston, I'm going to have you take this one already. Like that was already in the back of my mind. You sitting there looking like you have a lot to say on it. But actually one of my friends who, he's like just starting to get into the gym, he was asking me like, how come like bodybuilders who have all these huge muscles and this amazing aesthetic can't lift the same as like a trained powerlifter could, right? And what's the difference between muscle and strength? Houston, go for it.
Oh God. Oh man, y'all have to forgive me because I want to collect my thoughts, one, and two, I might rant. So if I rant too long, just tell me to shut up. A lot of people don't understand that strength is a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Like going back to that mind muscle connection, you with strength, you have to be able to develop the ability to call on that strength when you need it. And learning how to stabilize and all of the stuff like the core concepts of bodybuilding and when you first get a barbell is even more important as you get stronger. Because a lot of times it's not really about can you move the weight, it's can you stabilize yourself enough to actually move this weight the way you need it to. So because when we know the difference between 80% and 90% is way harder, way harder. When you're trying to get new PRs, especially when you get to a certain level of strength, first reps have to be almost damn near perfect, if not perfect. So one thing that I was thinking about when it comes to strength training and bodybuilding and like with how bodybuilders, like you'll see, look at this way, a bodybuilder that was an open bodybuilder that was in my that weighed the same as me, I weigh about 240, 245. If I had a bodybuilder do the same workout or try to do the same numbers as me, I probably couldn't do it, but also too, I probably couldn't do a lot of stuff that he's doing. Just because now the thing about getting bigger and getting more muscle is when you get more muscle, does that necessarily mean that you're going to get way stronger? No, but you will generally get stronger, but you won't be able to move the weight like a trained lifter would, because when you get bigger, that's more muscle that you can recruit. And that's also tying back into power building, why it's really good to learn how to blend those different things, because you're getting better at the movement while you're packing on tons of muscle. And then not just as you're packing all that muscle, you're getting stronger and you're learning how to express that strength. Then that volume, like Vaughn was saying for his off season, the stronger you get, the more volume you can add into your training, especially if you know how to program correctly. And then when you get that mindfulness and actually recruit all those muscle fibers and to be more aware when you're training, you're just gonna get way bigger, because we've seen people doing the same program, very similar strength, very similar build, and one person will progress way more than the other, and it has nothing to do with genetics at the time. It's about how they're training in the gym.
100%. Yeah.
Now, when it comes back to like conjugate and concurrent and different training methods, like I love conjugate. I train a lot of my guys in different training styles, but like I personally, most of my training is concurrent modeling or conjugate. Now, the reason for that, and like what Vaughn was saying, like he likes to go heavy for his mental health. and it helps him. That intensity and feeling better also makes a session better. Because if you're feeling good, dude, you might do extra set or two that you might not have done if you didn't go heavy. But with me personally, especially like with my squat, my weakness is stability. So I like to use bars that are nightmarish, SSB, the cambered bar, using bangs and chans to train my body how to stabilize. Because I can handle a lot more volume with deadlifting, but I can't handle a lot of volume with squats at the same percentage. So I back off, use different bars, and you're adding chains and bands to train the lifter, train me specifically to one, learn how to accelerate through a weak point and how to maintain and generate tension, which also helps me grow a lot more without destroying my body. Because like we were saying at the beginning of all this, powerlifting and bodybuilding is extremely hard on your body. If you're training hard, dude, you're rarely going to feel really good, to be honest with you. But you know exactly what I'm saying. And that's what a lot of people don't understand too, because like you'll see, this is kind of tying back into what Cody was saying, of like you'll see people trying to move a certain way. Sometimes you can't move the same way. And sometimes you can't keep, let's say I'm really long limbed. Do I have the strength and the capacity to move like 3 sets of 8 at a certain percentage? Yes. But because of how I'm built, tying back even more to Cody was saying, controlling that eccentric where you're not squatting super deep. For me to squat super deep, that requires a lot of internal hip rotation. And I'm not built, I'm built to move the weight, but I'm not built to actually tolerate higher rep ranges because of how I'm built. Now, deadlifts, I can pull all day. But also, too, look how long my arms are. I have long-ass arms, long-ass legs, and built like Slenderman. So I can crank out weight on deadlifts constantly. So if you look at my physique, you'll notice I have really big upper back, really big back. But like with squats and like my legs, I have good legs. But look, my legs are very long. So that's something I have to work on myself. But for me to train my legs optimally, I had to do totally different things. Squats, I don't get a ton of leg work out of because of the fact of the matter. I don't do a lot of volume. So I do a lot of hack squats, a lot of leg press, a lot of Bulgarian split squats, stuff like that.
Whereas I'm the complete opposite. I have very short limbs, right? Very short legs and a longer torso, and I can crank out volume on squats all day. So, that just kind of goes to show like there's not going to be a one size fits all solution for everybody, right? And I think that a lot of times, going back to the impact that social media has had on the fitness industry, like people see these things and think that they're supposed to be able to achieve those things because, all these other people are. But it really comes down to what is going to be the best model, the best program, the best whatever for you and your particular body type, your particular injuries, your particular whatever. And what's going to be optimal for you is going to look different than somebody else. But kind of going back to what we were talking about, the differences between, strength and hypertrophy, right? And kind of tapping into like the different type of muscle fibers and all of those things. Being able to have a ton of endurance, right? And being able to, stay with those reps for a very long time doesn't necessarily translate over into the strength training world. And when people look at the strength training world and they see people lifting this insane amount of weight, there becomes this misconception that power lifters lift heavy, as in heavy percentages, every single time that they train. And Houston, you and I were kind of talking about this earlier today. The stronger you get, the higher your percentages get and the more intensity your training is going to have, right? So as you start to get stronger and you're 80%, right? For you, Houston, is what, 700 pounds is 80% for you?
I think 80% is about 675 to 700.
Yeah. So being able to do the rep count that, most people would be able to do at 80% is probably not feasible for you, if we're talking about total training volume, right?
Not recoverable, actually. If I was a straight bodybuilding, maybe. But like for powerlifting, since I'm in peak, since I'm in prep right now, I could not do that because a lot of people don't understand. Like, let's say your max deadlift is 315. My math is kind of bad, so I'm going to make it real easy. Let's say 80% of someone's 200 pounds, and you're doing a set of 10. That is 2,000 pounds of volume. Let's say I do 700 for 10. That's 7,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say we're doing 5 sets of that. You're doing 10,000 pounds of volume. I'm doing 35.
exactly. So, you know, when it comes to the different the different variations, right? Like adding the chains, adding the bands, adding all of those things, it's going to create that same amount of intensity while keeping you, right, as a lifter safe and making that session recoverable, right? Because,
Yes.
you know, lifting 35,000 pounds in one session, right, is just, that's stupid. Like there's no reason you should be doing that. So, you know, being able to add in those variations to still get that same intensity while being able to recover is huge. And, you know, I think that people outside looking in look at powerlifting as like just straight moving weight. And that's really not what it is at all. Like you have to train smart. Otherwise you're definitely not going to last and you're just going to beat your body to hell.
Well, I really
think
like
that
Houston referred to it as a skill. I thought that was a really good way to put what powerlifting is to just accentuate that point.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you know, when you were talking about technique earlier, Houston, and one thing that I find funny, and I hear a lot of powerlifters say this, or a lot of lifters say this, is, oh, I'm dropping the weight to work on my technique. And I think that is like one of the dumbest things to do, honestly. Like your technique does not break down at 70%, right? Your technique is going to start to break down right around like 87, right? So it doesn't make any sense to me why people are dropping the weight in order to improve their technique when that's not where the problem lies.
That's the thing that I've never really quite understood, because a lot of powerlifters, they want to go heavy all the time. But when it comes time to actually fix the movement, they want to go super light. And it's like, dude, anybody could squat 135 pounds, 225 pounds, like properly, if you're a trained athlete. I mean, but like when your max squats like 500, 600, 700 pounds, let's say you train a technique with 315, what is that going to do for you?
No,
That's going to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like you have to fix the problem where the problem is, right? It's like you have a flat tire, but you're looking at the engine. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now when we talk about power building and taking the concept of hypertrophy and the concept of strength and putting them together, right? Like personally, I coach a lot of bodybuilders in their off season just for the sake of putting on size. That's something that I'm really, really good at, is helping people put on size, and not talking about putting on size in one particular area, but putting on size to the frame overall, right? And, you know, we talked about this earlier where the compound movements, you're really going to see the benefit from that. So when we are talking about power building and putting these two concepts together, like how, I'm curious from the bodybuilding side. So Vaughn and Cody, you can chime in on this. Like, where would you prioritize? Would you prioritize more on the strength side of things, or would you prioritize more on the hypertrophy side of things, and why?
Are we talking about an off season?
Yeah, well, just in general, just power building is what I'm talking about.
I think if you're talking about power building specifically, I think your emphasis should be on a strength side. Just generally because you're probably going to be looking at just a little bit more of a general demographic kind of clientele in that sense. And just with the way the world is, I think that's what a lot of people lack, is just overall body strength. And you know, one of my clients, you guys may not know, but Ashley does, but she is a like 7-time breast cancer survivor. She's had health problems for the past 50 years. And we started working out 2 or 3 years ago. And just the overall strength that we've gained just from her doing, you know, goblet squats in her living room. She is now going from like a blood transfusion every 2 months to every 6 months kind of thing. And that's just from overall just muscular density in her body. Right. And so I think just kind of talking about that, the focal point should be a strength and just a foundational kind of functional strength. Because what I do think is a little bit more difficult is on the hypertrophy side to really be able to reap the benefits of that, is that mind muscle connection. And that is something that does take time. It's something that has to be learned. It's not necessarily taught. It's kind of something each person has to figure out for themselves, versus where technical stance of a squat, a bench press, stuff like that, you can I feel like kind of teach people a little bit easier. So for me personally, I would take a pretty much like a 70-30 strength versus hypertrophy split for a power building program.
So when you say it's easier to teach people squat, bench, and dead, do you mean like it's because you can break that down versus having it just be the mental side with the connection?
Yeah, strictly because that is a technical teaching point versus where the mind muscle connection is a very intrinsical thing that you have to learn for yourself kind of thing.
But don't you think the mind muscle connection still has to be there on the strength side of things too?
I do, but that's what I'm saying though, is like kind of to reverberate my point at the very beginning is I where I see the benefit in both of them, but I do think that it takes a little bit more time for you to find the movements that work for you the best, that work for your body, as far as a mind muscle connection goes, versus where in the meantime, while you're figuring those things out, you can at least learn the technical aspects of those big four lifts, and still be able to make progress from a strength scale, which is only going to elevate that hypertrophy section of the programming as well. So I think being able to learn technicalities from those the main core lifts that we all know and love will just accelerate you being able to benefit from a hypertrophic standpoint. So like I said, with that, I think the emphasis should be on the strength side.
Gotcha. Would you take that same approach to a bodybuilder in their off season?
Maybe not quite as heavily geared towards strength. Obviously, in the off season, that's what you want to focus on, just because weight moves weight. So once we kind of get into those preps, if your total volume is going to go up, a little bit during prep, a little bit more repetition, stuff like that, the compounds come down. You may be doing a little bit more exercises, as opposed to, you're repping out the 100s on incline dumbbell bench press. Now you're repping out the 120s. And where necessarily just because you're going up in weight doesn't necessarily, it does, right? Just because your muscles are getting bigger doesn't mean you're getting stronger. But if you can push more weight more times, you're going to get stronger, which means your muscles are going to go, right? So definitely in the off season, still focusing in on that strength aspect, but it would probably, for a bodybuilder, be a little bit more on that like 60-40 range, just because we still do need the aesthetics to stay there. You don't want to completely blow out, all that good stuff.
Vaughn, would you agree with that?
Yes, I don't know. I think I'm like, I guess, in between. Especially just coming off of all season. I just took a year-long all season. It was primarily pretty much full power building that I did most of that all season. And I would definitely say that I prioritize strength most of the time. So I would agree with Cody in the sense of, even though bodybuilders, hypertrophy, and those things are definitely like huge factors when it comes to bodybuilding. But I was definitely focusing more on strength, a lot of compound lifts. I would have maybe a squat dominant day. It was a very interesting power building program I was doing. Some days I would squat and bench in the same day, and different things like that. A lot of a little bit of accessory work, but really, really dominant on compound lifts, deadlift to knees, and different things like that. So with that being said, just from a standpoint from my personal standpoint, from what's worked for me, I would definitely say prioritizing strength from where I am before to where I am now. It's a crazy difference, man. Like going back from, like how Cody was saying, you can go from repping the hundreds a couple of times to repping them a bunch of times, as you build strength, X, Y, and Z. Before my power building program, I'd be able to, hit the 80s, hit the 90s. I'd be able to hit the hundreds for maybe about like 6 reps. By the time I was at the end of that power building and coming out of my off season into prep, man, I was hitting the hundreds for like 17 reps. You know what I mean? And this is like all natural, no gear or anything. So I definitely think prioritizing strength during that power building stage will relate to hypertrophy during your prep. It will correlate as you go through that process, just from a personal standpoint, because I've seen it with myself. You know what I mean?
Now,
I saw
Vaughn,
my strength and my muscles. My strength improved, my muscles got bigger, everything kind of was like moving at a nice linear fashion.
Now, Vaughn, do you keep that same approach, like as high of a priority on strength the deeper you get into your prep, or does your focus kind of change a little bit once you hit like that 8-week out mark? Are you still putting in those
Definitely.
compound movements all the way up, or how does that look for you?
Like right now, like, yeah, like I'm 12 weeks out or 11 weeks, and I'm not doing a lot of crazy compound lifts, and I'm not going crazy heavy. I mean, I'm definitely making sure I'm stimulating that muscle, making sure that I'm pushing that intensity, but yeah, definitely not squatting as heavy. It's funny, the other day, I had threw 405 on that. Cause like I tell you guys, man, like squatting, lifting heavy helps me release my dopamine. So like, I like to put on some nice weight and feel some weight on my body when I'm in the gym. So I had put on 405 on the squat rack. And man, during that off season, I was repping 405 for like 12 reps. Easily, like not easily, but you know, I had a couple more in the tank and I felt good. So I had threw 405 on there, and this was maybe last week. And I was just like, you know, I know I'm still in prep, but kind of want to make this a nice little challenging set. And man, I got to rep 8 and I was gassed. I mean, gassed. I mean, like reality check. Talk about like took that weight off, dropped it a little bit, picked my form back up, worked on my muscle connection, and repped out 315 for a nice solid set, opposed to that
So do you
405.
think do you think at this point, so I notice you keep referring to that word intensity, right? So do you find at the point that you're at, what do you find more effective? That 405 that's really just kind of beating your ass, that you're just grinding through, or do you find that 315 where you can lock in, it's a nice comfortable weight that you're under, you can bring that intensity, you know you're going to be able to push that to failure X amount of reps. Do you view those sets the same, being in a prep right now, or do you still find benefits in touching that 405 every once in a while?
Personally, I do find benefits touching that 405 every once in a while. Of course, as I get deeper into prep, like, you know, 4 weeks out, I wouldn't suggest that. But touching that 405, even though I only did 8 reps, knowing myself, knowing my training back from going back to making sure we're doing proper reps, full range of motion, mind muscle connection, tempo, all those different things. That 405 for the 8 reps I did were a solid 8 reps. They weren't rushed. They weren't just going with the flow. These were hard, intentional reps where I felt that mind muscle connection. I felt that tension where I need to feel it. So I definitely wouldn't say that they were like, you know, just wasted reps. So I would say that they definitely have a place. That 315 that I hit for the 12 right after definitely served its place. Nice little back off set, good range of motion, making sure that everything's feeling nice and loose. But I do think that touching that 405 benefited me quite a great deal, especially the way I moved the load, which I think is
Yeah.
always the most important thing, is how you're moving that weight at that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry to kind of take us off on that, Ashley, but I just kind of thought that was a perfect kind of correlation of what we're talking about a little bit, versus where even in the midst of me and Vaughn are both in show prep right now. And even in the midst of all that, our training philosophies are very similar. It is very much, as Houston was referring to earlier, the Dorian Yates style, right? And versus where we love to take that top set where you're pushing, you know, your 8 rep max, and you're pushing that for all you've got, and it's a heavy 8 reps, and then you pull it back and you become just as intentional, just as intense with those sets, but it's still a little bit of a lighter weight where we can tap into that mind muscle connection just a little bit deeper. It's a little more confidence that you have under that weight, under that bar, whatever that may be. And so we're actually kind of in our philosophies, even, you know, 8-12 weeks out from a show, we're incorporating some sense of power building into these programs, right? And even with what you guys were talking about, what Houston was talking about for his leg day, you know, a squat day looks a little bit different from a traditional power lifter. You know, he's going through working on those hack squats, working on those split squats, a lot of things you don't see power lifters do. You know, but he kind of understands his limitations and what his goals are and what he needs to get there. And to me, that is kind of the epitome of power building, personally.
I'll be really honest with you. Most of the time, I've considered myself more of a power builder than power lifter, although I've competed.
Same.
and coach powerlifters, to be really honest with you. And also too, tying back to powerlifting also, and how you write programs. So like even with conjugate and concurrent, like what Vaughn was talking about with his 4-5 for that 8, that's when you can apply powerlifting concepts where you can have him doing like 4-5 reverse band. So you're still getting that training stimulus that you would get from that 4-5, and you crank out those last few reps that you get gassed at the bound the hole, the reverse bands and stuff like that can help aid him out of the hole, so he can still train his quads properly. But since he's going to be in prep and get deeper in prep, it's a little bit more safe. And that's where I think that a lot of people are missing out on powerlifting and bodybuilding and powerbuilding in general, with learning how to actually combine these methodologies. Like you're saying, like a lot of people, powerhouse believe it's like conjugate or nothing, SBD or nothing, linear periodization. It's like we can combine all of them technically, and like for let's get use Vaughn as another example. Let's say he wants to do that again this week. He could do 4-5 for 12, because he obviously has the strength to do it, but he can't express that strength because it's a prep, not his off season. So you add reverse bands, you do other stuff like that. You know, he might be able to crank out a whole other set because it might be aiding him like 40, 50 pounds out of the hole. And like I think that's something that's missing a lot from a lot of powerlifters and even bodybuilders nowadays. Because like a lot of the golden era guys, you know, they were smaller and they weren't nearly as big, but their physiques and the way that they trained and how they kept their intensity up through their entire press, I think they did that a lot more than bodybuilders now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like going back, I totally just at this commonality, but I mean, just intensity, just that word just keeps coming up over and over again. It's intensity, 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 and that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're working out with intensity wherever you're doing. If you're doing hypertrophy style training, you're doing strength style training, whatever that looks like, you need to be giving 100%. Like, and to me, like, not to go on this little rant, but that's where my passion for fitness lies, and that's where my love for fitness comes from, is just the fact that fitness is something that is going to be as rewarding as you make it. Anything in life has so many other variables. There's so many different things of why you weren't able to get to your goals, or this traffic, or this person did this, or whatever it is. But when you're in the gym, when you're talking about your physique, when you're talking about how you look, that comes down to the things you chose to put in your body, the way you chose to lift that weight, and the amount of time that you chose to put behind it. You know what I mean? So fitness is one of those things where it's in your control. Like, the ball is in your court, 100%. There is no external factors. There's no one else to blame. You can blame your coach and all these other things if you choose to, but at the end of the day, it's your physique, your body, your control, your intake, your output, everything. So if you give 100%, your body's going to give 100% back to you. But if you give 50, it's definitely going to give 50 back to you too.
And I think a lot of times people have a really hard time gauging what 100% truly looks like, right? And also giving yourself a little bit of grace to understand that your 100% today and your 100% tomorrow may not look the same, and that's fine, right? That's totally fine.
So that's an interesting question I actually have for a powerlifting standpoint. Is a big debate that's going on in the bodybuilding world right now is the logbook training. So for powerlifting, I'm not really sure which program this would fall under, but I know, you know, one of you guys' big things is each week is a percentage scheme on that. So how stapled in as coaches are you guys onto that, given what you just said, that not every day is 100%? So how does that kind of work through powerlifting programming?
So for me personally, and this is one of those things that kind of comes with experience, because like a lot of books will say you can do like, I'm trying to think of a way I can kind of break this down. One, it really depends on the lifter. You have to have time with your lifter. Two, learning how to make the volume manageable. So like, let's say I have someone trying to do heavier weight. I might have someone doing like 3 sets of 8, 4x6, or some people might be doing like 2x10. It really depends on the person. Now, when it comes to like percentages and stuff, I don't like RPE. I only do percentages. Now, RPE does work, but actually, let me go back a little bit. So, if anybody doesn't know, RPE stands for rating of perceived exertion. Anyways, let me go back to what I was about to say. A lot of people will do RPE, especially newer lifters, and this kind of ties back to what Vaughn and Cody were saying about intensity and at 100%. And RPE 7 for a lot of lifters will mean this is an easy workout or whatever. For someone like all of us, really, RPE 7 means I only have 3 reps left in the tank, which is why I don't do it. Because when I see RPE 7, that means I'm hitting right up under 3 rep max, which never really worked for me. Now, when it comes to percentages, that kind of ties into how the different training styles and like conjugate, DUP, fifth set, and stuff like that. That's why I really like conjugate and fifth set specifically, because it's very phasic. You're doing 70%, 80%, 90%, but you're doing really low volume. You're doing 4 doubles, but then on the last set, you're doing an AMRAP. So each week you already know where you are, and as long as you're over 3 reps, you're still getting the needed stimulus to keep progressing each week. Now, when it comes to straight percentages and kind of progressing people through that, it really kind of depends on what can this person tolerate and how well do they move. Because we've all seen guys that like they can't do 5 reps at 7%, but they can definitely hit something fucking heavy. Now, it's kind of that's one thing that's kind of sucks about lifting and powerlifting and training in general. It's like there's really aren't any concrete answers, you know. But like specifically for like percentages, I do have I forgot the name of the scale. It's a scale that kind of tells you about what percentage range you're supposed to do. And specifically, I usually kind of program on the lower end of that percentage range because most people should be able to do that. And then I adjust it from there, which is part of the reason why you need to have a good coach, because they need to be watching your videos and you watch how you're moving, how you're breaking down. And that's, we're going to keep progressing through percentages. But like, you know, let's say 1 week you move okay. Instead of jumping 5%, you're going to jump 2.5% and then adjust the numbers maybe. Or like a conjugate, you're going to have those lower percentages with the bands and other stuff like that, where you get a totally different type of training stimulus, and it's also so light that it really doesn't matter, if that makes sense.
Yeah Okay.
So it's funny for me and a lot of my clients, I don't use RPE for everybody, but I'm more apt to use it for women than I am for men. And that's because women's strength varies so much, and their perceived intensity varies so much, just depending on where they're at in the month and where they're at in their cycle. So there was an article that I read, and I can't think of the name or the person who wrote it right now, just because I want to think of it. But women are at their peak strength for 6 days out of the month, and that's it. Wow. So for a lot of my female lifters, I will go more towards the RPE method, again, because the strength does vary so much. But I tend to go more percentage based for men, because there's less variables impacting their intensity, right?
And also too, even going back to like the variables, like Vaughn was saying, like it's really just you in the gym. Percentage is also really effective, or not just from the coaching side, but us, if we're all being honest, it kind of varies more on the lifter side. It's like I could technically write a damn near perfect program and have someone fall out of the program because they're not sleeping or eating or doing what they need to do to actually be able to progress week to week. Mm-hmm. That's another big thing that a lot of people kind of forget. It's like percentages in programming is a good thing, but at the end of the day, it's this person fueling themselves and doing what they need to do to progress week to week to week, so they can keep up with that percentage. Because like let's say I've had this happen where I wrote like 70% for like 8s, or 2 sets of 10 at like 60%. Then the next week I had a client, the same person. The next week she could barely do 3x5 at like 72.5 or 62.5, whatever the number was. It was only 2.5% higher. But because she allowed herself to get stressed, not eat, not sleep, and then not be able to compartmentalize that stress outside the gym, she couldn't do what she needed to do. That's the other thing too. Like a lot of people that we don't talk about in lifting is because also too, if you notice, I know Vaughn probably could probably admit to this too. Most lifters, once you get really into it, we kind of chill out. That intensity is only brought out in the gym, but when it comes outside of the gym,
Yeah.
most lifters kind of chill out and level out because we know that if I allow myself to get upset here, my body's going to react. If I get upset, I bloat. If I get stressed outside of the gym, I won't be able to I won't be able to express my strength in the gym because I'm already in an agitated state, so I can't even bring myself higher. And that's another thing that's big.
I mean,
I've got to learn that skill a little bit, Houston. We might have to talk. That's why I'm not strong. I'm just angry all the time.
yeah, you gotta
I chilled out.
But now, piggybacking off what Houston said, I mean, I completely agree. Like, having that stronghold on your emotions is gonna like transcend your performance so much, man. Like, knowing how to take that emotion, compress it, and then compartmentalize. There we go. Like you just said, that stress, whatever that feeling is that you're having, tucking it away and then utilizing it when it's necessary. It's crazy how that fuel can push a lot of things if you learn how to use that fire. You know what I mean? Or you can overwhelm yourself, have a bad day, have a shitty workout, have a shitty performance, fall back on your goals, and now you have to do all this other shit to get back on track.
Exactly.
You know, one thing that Vaughn said earlier, he said it sounds kind of silly, but there is actually a lot of truth to it. He said, you know, get in the gym and turn on some R&B or something. You know, like on my heavy sets, I rock Halsey. You know what I mean? Like I gotta chill out a little bit. I gotta find something that's gonna put me in that nice spot to get what we got to get done. And that's not always, you know, flying at the seat of your handle. So I just think that's a good point that both of you said. You know, just something as kind of simple as that can really bring you back down, and you can really kind of exert yourself better, having that mental clarity.
You want to know where that music thing kind of came from for me? Back in college, I ran track and cross country, and when I would run cross country, whenever I would listen to like rap music or anything like super fast paced, I would notice I would run faster, but then I'd gas myself out about mile 3 or 4 because I was just picking it up into the music so much. But when it was like a slower playlist, I was able to kind of maintain my tempo throughout the whole thing, just following that beat of whatever those, you know, style of music I was listening to. And I wouldn't be gassed out at the end of that, you know, 6 miles, 10K, whatever we were doing that day. So I have to say, I kind of took that same aspect into the gym to slow down my reps, because I realized, like, when I was listening to that fast-paced music, I mean, you go the tempo of the music is you literally have headphones in your ear blasting the beat. Like, it's crazy to think that your body wouldn't react to the way that music is going. You know what I mean? It's like, how can you work out slow and you listening to some crazy intense music, man? Like, it's impossible, right? You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Definitely.
That's also carrying, dude, man. That's a great idea too, because like, depending on what the intent of my session is, I'll have really chill, like, I'll play like early 2000s rap, G-Funk, Lena Horne, you know, Bobby Womack, some chill shit. So I'm trying to get like a good pump so I can take my time and really just be mindful. Now, if I'm powerlifting heavy sometimes, I can be the most. Some of the music I pull out, you'll be like, whoa.
Because that's what you need. You gotta pull that out sometime, man. Like,
Sometimes,
it's a
yeah.
time and a place for everything. It's a time and a place for everything.
It's a time and place
Ashley,
for
what do you
everything,
listen to?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Ashley, what do you listen to?
Me?
Yeah, what do you listen to in the gym?
Honestly, it depends on my mood going in, and I will pick something. Like, if I'm in a great mood, I'm going to pick something that is going to continue on that track. If I'm in a shit mood, I'm going to pick something that's going to turn that around. But I'm never in a shit mood. When I'm powerlifting, I usually listen to like heavy metal type stuff, which is something I would never listen to in any other situation other than that. And I have a very specific playlist of like heavy metal stuff specifically for competitions that I only listen to when I'm about to walk on the platform. But I've noticed like when I'm bodybuilding, I have like transitioned into like really kind of ratchet rap, honestly.
comes with the territory.
I like it.
Yeah. Comes with the territory.
It's kind of funny that we're talking about all this because, well, I kind of have a point. So what this is called technically is you see a lot of athletes, professional athletes, you know, they'll say once again the zone, they just everything kind of just blurs out what you're doing. Really, with music is you're manipulating the flow state, trying to enter a flow state where all you're doing is focusing only on what you're doing at specific moment. Especially with bodybuilding, you're playing that R&B, you're playing that slower music, you're in that flow state where all thing you're focused on and feeling and thinking of is that pump. When you're going heavy, you're playing something that's getting you so aggressive and out of your head where all thing you're focusing on is just moving the weight. And I actually had a huge issue last year, I would say, where my strength dipped a lot. Where it's kind of weird because this prep, I'm hitting numbers at the beginning of my prep that I was hitting at the end of my prep last year, and I've hit it very easily. But what I struggled with for the longest was I went from being this, because you know a lot of younger guys, you'll see this shit where they'll walk up to the bar and you get like a gorilla, headbutt the bar, have their friend slap in the back of their head. I was one of those guys. And I went from being that to being very calm, and my strength dipped terribly. For like
you got to treat like the nine tails.
I had to learn how. Yeah, I had to learn how to just. I just walk to the bar now. I just breathe. I do a lot of breathing and stuff too. Kind of mess with. This is probably a good topic for later too. But like using your breathing and using your thoughts and especially with bodybuilding, envisioning and kind of visualizing the muscle contracting before you even do the movement.
Mm-hmm.
I do that a lot of my training now where before I do a heavy set or do something that really requires me to focus, I sit there and breathe. I sit there and try to enter my flow state and stuff like that. So I've gone from that, even I still play heavy, crazy music sometimes, but my actual state of being externally is way more calm.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to figure that out.
Like, as you're saying that, it's funny because you hear Dorian talk about that was one of his huge issues, you know, when he said the place that he had to go to create that physique, he had so many issues with going to that place because I mean it truly is, man. Like when you're going to go pick up 500 plus pounds, like you're going to an animalistic state where your mindset is now turned primitive, and the only thing you can focus on is I need to pick this up. Like that's the only thing you can focus on. You don't know why you put this much pressure to pick this thing up, but you know that if you don't pick it up, it's going to be a problem later. So you need to pick this up. And you know what I mean? And like to put yourself in that mindset and then finish the set and then pull yourself back out.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Woo!
So what does that look like for you guys? Out. What are you tapping into to get to that point? What does that
really
look like
real,
for you?
Man. I actually taught my training partner Dylan Lukemeyer, one of the best spotters, man. He actually helped me in my rehab and everything for my leg and stuff. But like he'll tell you, like when I'm going heavy and having a lighter day, you could tell the second I walk in. Even if I walk in the exact same way, it's like and I hate the fact that I have to do this to myself sometimes to go really heavy. I have to almost put myself in a slightly uncomfortable mood, to be really honest with you. My mindset is not even anger. It's like, it's going to sound super generic, but it's like almost a fucked up mindset. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, like, I get like leg day anxiety. You know, I got a big set of hack squats. I go in there just like shit, man. But it's it's what you got to do. So
yeah. I mean, this is gonna sound super me-heady, but like, this is part of the reason I cut all my warm-ups, like, or my setups from all my training videos, because like, I remember last year I hit what was it? 4 is it raw gym that I train at. I hit 455 for a single on bench, and like I hit nose torque eyes roll in my head. I'm like, you can see all the veins in my jaw, like kind of like lock. You can see all my jaw locking up, and I just go into this weird state where it's like purely animalistic, and I hate doing that because I don't like not having that control of myself. But when I get to that mindset, my strength is just way up.
Yeah,
Are you cool,
yeah.
man? But you guys probably been there too, where it's just like you get so aggressive, it's low key uncomfortable.
For sure, for sure.
It's so funny when I'm going in for a really heavy lifting session, I have so much going on in here, but you would never see it. And even when I'm on the platform, and Cody can attest that Cody and I have trained together like countless times. But even when I'm on the platform competing and I'm hitting weight I've never touched in my life before, my face is just so neutral to the point where it doesn't even look like I'm struggling. And people are like, why didn't you put more weight on the bar? I'm like, it wouldn't have happened. Like in here and what I'm feeling is very different than what my face actually looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Borderline annoying, but because I'm the exact opposite. So
I did want to piggyback. Sorry, I'm standing up. I guess I need some salt, guys, because my hamstrings, oh my gosh. But with that being said, for me personally, when it comes to like tapping into that like animalistic mindset, like time to get this weight in, I'm not gonna lie, guys. I mean, like I channel like I just try to channel like a different being. Like I remember back in college, when I was pledging for my fraternity, we would have this thing called a grit, and they would like put your grit on, and it's kind of like this face that you put on. It's like kind of like you smell something stink, and it's kind of like you push all this aggression into your face where you're just like so laser focused. And those are kind of like cues I think about when I'm going to the bar, and I'll put on that grit, and I'll just be like, I'll channel in like everything from naysayers to doubters to me doubting myself. You can't pick this up. Yeah, I can't. Like all of those little imperfections, I'll channel into my head, and I'm like,
yeah,
like time to silence that. Like it's time to get the job done. So I mean,
you talk yourself a
personally,
little
like
bit.
for me, huh?
You talk to yourself a little bit. Sometimes when I go to a bar, especially if I'm a little bit nervous, I'll sit there, I'll walk into the bar, and I'm just like talking to myself. I'm like, come on, dude, you can fucking do this.
Yeah.
You've done way more than this. Stop being a fucking baby. Let's go. You know.
Nah, definitely.
Getting that grit.
You got to tap in, man. Yeah, you got to tap in that
into that grit.
That's one of those things too, man. Like, it's kind of funny, like going into social media, you'll see a lot of kids, they'll fake, when they drop the weight, they'll yell and all this stuff. It looks so fake, man. It's like, y'all
have you
trained enough to even hit that yet?
I hate to be this guy, but have you seen the videos and it's like guys going to failure and they're in a hack squat and you're like shaking like all crazy and you're like, bro, I've done a crazy set. You're not even nowhere near that level of failure to be moving like that. Like I've been in a set where you feel like that. You don't look anything like that when you're in a set like that. Trust me.
No,
that's not
you're doing
like,
this.
Yeah.
Poop ran down your leg.
Gritting your teeth, your face will like explode. You're like, especially when you don't hack squat, you're like, dude, you can't even. You're like, okay, I have to really focus and just tighten the fuck up and just show no emotion, just hit this shit, or this shit gonna crush me. And that's why I do. It's so funny. Fitness community and stuff is so cringe to me nowadays, man. Especially for like the social media stuff. I'll see guys, they'll pick it up. Especially I see like lifters, they'll pick up 500, 600, 700 pounds, it's great and all, but they'll just slam the weight down and yell and stuff. It's like, man, this is training.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the big trend now is as soon as you're done with your deadlift, after you've like aggressively just thrown the bar back on the platform, you just take your belt off and throw it across the damn. I'm like, what are you doing? I don't get it.
Not even, and the crazy thing is too, I feel like now we're going to some other topics, but like the care for the gym, like if you work out at this gym consistently, this is your facility where you're going to get your gains. You know what I mean? Why would you want to treat the equipment like that? Don't you want to use that barbell again? Don't you want to like use these things and they work just as well as they worked the time before? You thought that slamming them at the end of your set was going to keep them in good condition? Like,
So really funny story, just real quick. So that back day that me and Cody had a couple weeks ago, and we were doing the rack pulls, right? And I posted a video on all the social platforms, right? And I found that certain platforms tend to bring out people who like to comment negatively on things they know nothing about. And I got so many comments about how you're not supposed to deadlift off of a rack and how the rack is going to break if I continue to do that. And I'm like, first of all, it's not a deadlift.
What?
Yeah. Second of all,
Is it
thank you for thinking.
You're talking about the safety bars?
The safety bars, yeah. They thought that I was going to break the safety bars by doing a deadlift off the rack. And I'm like, well, it's not a deadlift, it's a rack pull. And they're like, well, it just looks like a shortened version of a deadlift. I'm like, okay. So went into like all about what a rack pull is, right? Because on social media, I don't like to like just attack people and make them feel stupid, because like people just like, they don't know. And I get that, right? Like I'm very well versed in this, but a lot of people aren't. And there was a point where I wasn't well versed in this. So like I try and give people the benefit of the doubt. But aside from the movement itself, this guy was like dead set that I shouldn't be doing that because I'm going to break the safety bars. And that because they're not designed to have weight consistently dropped on them. And I was like, well, first of all, thank you for thinking I'm strong enough to break an entire rig. Like I'm kind of flattered by that, to be perfectly honest. But he would not stop. Like it's probably like 15, 17 comments deep on that.
People are crazy, man. People are crazy.
Yeah.
People are crazy.
And at the end of it, I was just like, well, if I break it, I'll buy it. Like, what do you want me to tell you?
People are annoying, man. Especially in the gym. Everybody knows stuff in the gym. Everybody knows exactly what's supposed to work, except for the professionals.
Literally, except for professionals.
Oh, dude, like I saw something the other day, man. I was like, I don't know how these kids have so much confidence when it comes to like just saying these absolutes. You know what I'm trying to say? So I'm like, or that I'm the best coach, I'm the best trainer, I'm this, and that. It's like, man, I've been doing this for a while, and I still feel uncomfortable sometimes writing stuff to people.
Yeah, that imposter syndrome gets real sometimes.
Imposter syndrome is definitely real, 100%. And the crazy thing about it is, these guys will say they're coaches, then they'll coach their friends for shows and all types of stuff. And it's sad because that one friend might have some really good genetics, or really good potential, or really strong work ethic, or all those key things that you want out of a good client, but they chose to go with the wrong coach. And now it's not saying it's wasted talent, but it's for them to realize that that coaching's bad, for them to now turn their talent back into something that's worth being coached. And if they never realize that, they're just stuck in this limbo effect of no growth, no stimulus. You know what I mean? They may see a little bit of good progress because they had good genetics, but it's going to halt because that coach really didn't know what they were doing. You know,
or they just stop all in general because they had a really crappy coach, and that's their vision on coaches in general, right?
100%, that too.
You know, it's so funny on my social media platforms for people that have been following me for a while. Like I like to put a ton of like free value out there for people, right? And like I get a lot of people asking me questions in my DMs and stuff like that. I'm more than happy to answer. And it's funny because I get one of the questions I ask, like, have you ever worked with a coach? If so, like, do you mind sharing who you're working with? And a lot of people in the powerlifting world, especially if they're new to powerlifting, they hire a personal trainer that's not a powerlifting specific coach. And then they continue to work with that person, but consistently DM me all of these powerlifting specific questions. And I'm like, well, if you want all of that information, one, ask your coach. If your coach knows nothing about powerlifting, you probably should hire me instead, to be perfectly honest. But you know, it's funny that, you know, there's how do I want to say this? There's a bunch of really good coaches out there, but I feel like social media has diluted the coaching industry with influencers. And that's like a whole nother topic that we're all going to talk about a little bit later. But I think that has become a very, very big problem. And just because you look good, just because you can build yourself a butt, just because you can build yourself a set of pecs, just because you can do all these things for yourself, that doesn't mean that you can accomplish that same goal for other people.
And one last little tidbit, I guess to kind of close out what you were saying, at the end of the day, the beauty of it all is the real is always going to come to light.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you can be as much of a fake coach or, you know, one of those fitness influencers that really don't know what they're talking about. And at the end of the day, I mean, you may eat off of that. Don't get me wrong. Like, you might have some good meals off of that. But eventually, you know what I mean? The truth comes to light, and what's real is what's real. What a good coach is going to be a good coach, and what a bad coach is going to be a bad coach. And you know what I mean? Like, faking the funk, you're going to eventually get sought out. So you should do it the right way if you're going to be coaching these guys, taking people's money, and not just be there to give them compliments and feed their head, but actually coach them and tell them that you're doing this wrong and you need to fix it if you want to look better. And you need to have those conversations with your client, opposed to just saying, like, another great week, Ashley. Another great week. Yeah, great results. Keep it going. Another great one. Just to make me feel good, just so I can pay that monthly, you know, rate. You know what I mean? Like, we all do coaching to feel good. We all do coaches to help people reach their goals and to see people like hit a new level that they didn't think that they could reach. So I mean, like I said, like, that real is gonna show. Long story short.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's definitely going to be like an entire episode about like what a good coach is, what you should look for, red flags to look for. We're going to talk about all that just so y'all can do your due diligence before you hire somebody. But I think we're like, what, 2 hours in, guys? Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. Is there anything else that y'all want to add or finish with before we depart?
I guess really the only thing I wanted to finish off, I think I missed kind of the coaching corner of this section, but you know, just to kind of reiterate what Vaughn said, is the real always kind of comes to the real, and just to kind of give people a little bit more insight on what we're trying to accomplish on this podcast is, you know, we're kind of trying to filter through some of that. All I know for firsthand, personally, I can speak for Vaughn and Ashley, and then I know Houston wouldn't be here with Ashley, you know, if same couldn't be said about him. But that's one thing about all of us, is we live this every single day, and everything that we're talking about is stuff we've either experienced ourselves, or it's things our clients are experiencing, or it's anecdotal stuff that we see. You know, we're all very entrenched in whatever field that we're in this capacity, and we don't take it lightly. You know, I know me and Vaughn, you know, we link up, we do our bodybuilding thing, you know, and we live for this, you know, like the Olympia is like watching the Super Bowl for us, you know what I mean? And so I know the same thing can be said about Ashley with powerlifting, and then just the little bit of time I've gotten to know Houston, I can see it is very well embedded in him, you know. So that is one of our biggest goals, I think, to try to accomplish from this, is to filter through some of that dilution that has been created on social media, because we really do live this every single day. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence and a lot of theoretical evidence that we can really pass along, and hope to boost other people's journey along this.
100%.
Absolutely.
Well, Cody, I don't think I could have closed that out better myself. So thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry, I started.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Very welcome.
See you guys.
Talk to you later.
See ya.